If you're at all interested in pursuing a career in science and research, maybe even in medicine, it can be really helpful to have some sort of research experience, and in the latter case for medicine, some sort of clinical research experience if possible. But if no one in your family has ever done anything like that, it can be hard to navigate that process, and it can even be really hard to know what sorts of questions to ask and who to reach out to. In this video, I want to talk about some of my advice for getting involved in research as early as high school and during your undergraduate years. This can help prepare anyone for pursuing academic graduate programs like research-based master's and PhD programs, and some sorts of medical programs like an MD, where having clinical research experience is a helpful part of the application. Also MD, PhD programs for sure. So in terms of what research is, the whole point of research is to discover new knowledge. And really, research projects are generally going to be adding incremental, that is like super small amounts of knowledge to a big body of knowledge. So for example, when I was doing an undergraduate research project, I worked on this small specific bug called the hemlock woolly adelgid. It's a tiny little insect and it infests western hemlock trees. It's called the woolly adelgid because it makes little cotton ball looking things on trees. It's pretty obvious to spot, which makes it easy for researchers like me. So in terms of what I did though, I looked at the life cycle data of this bug in different collection sites across Washington state and tracked the life cycle data over time. So I wasn't like Einstein, like really totally reconceptualizing our knowledge of the universe. I was more so focused on a very specific problem and a very specific small incremental part of that problem. But still, my work helped us to better understand just a tiny little bit the life cycle of that bug in Washington state. That's really the sort of thing that happens in research, where you focus on a specific question, a specific issue, a specific part of that, and add new knowledge to that, which is really cool. The whole point is to increase our understanding of our universe. And as grandiose as that sounds, that's really what it is. And it doesn't even have to be in science. I mentioned that earlier. It can also be in the humanities. I did a research project in philosophy where I looked at an applied ethical issue in education. Basically, my question was, should colleges require students to be engaged in their community, whether through volunteer hours, like a certain number of hours, or justice-oriented service learning? I ended up concluding through my research that colleges probably should require their students to be involved in service learning. And whether or not any colleges ever implement that, I think that contribution that I got to make, although again incremental, is just a nice little piece of our overall picture of understanding as a species. And again, sounds kind of up in the air, up in the clouds, grandiose, but really that's what it is. And getting involved in that can be really cool. It can be a really rich, rewarding experience. It can be a lot of fun. It can be hard too. There is some hard work that can be done, but it's worth it. That's some background about what research is, what the goal of it is, what it looks like. Now for the question of the video, how to get plugged in. Really the best way to get plugged into research, in my opinion, is to think about the sorts of things that are interesting to you and then start Googling different opportunities that might work for that sort of research project. So for example, let's say that I'm interested in marine mammal biology and I would like to do a research project on that. One of the first things I can do is just start typing marine mammal biology research in Google and just see what sorts of things come up. It is super unlikely that the very first or second link you click on is going to be like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity. That's exactly right for me. It might even take you to a blog, which is not what we're looking for. Really, we're looking for a research lab whether in a university or in some sort of nonprofit research think tank, or maybe a private company that focuses on some specific research problem. Whatever the case, we're looking for a research lab that has an interest in our sort of research interest. So going back to that marine mammal biology research example, I might start Googling and just start looking through different things. What's cool is, let's say I click on that first link and it takes me to a blog post, which I'm not even looking for a blog post, right? I'm looking for a lab, but it might mention the name of a lead researcher in that very specific problem area. And that can help me realize, okay, maybe Professor James Bond really loves marine mammals. Now I know the name of someone in this field. I can start looking at James Bond's research lab, and that can help me sort of get oriented for what sorts of people are involved in that. And then at that point, I can start reaching out to these people. Even if I'm in high school, I can say, hey, James Bond, or hi, Professor Bond. I am a ambitious, hardworking high school student, whatever you want to say, who's interested in getting my foot in the door for research in marine mammal biology research. Is there any way we could have a conversation about me getting involved in your lab, or can you direct me to any labs that you know of who could use a high school intern who's willing to do anything to help get plugged in? That is a super good way to get plugged in. And I can speak from personal experience knowing faculty. Faculty really like people who are putting themselves out there, who are smart. And especially if you're in high school or early undergraduate, that can really help set you apart. Like, okay, this person is really, the fact that they're interested in research in like 12th grade is super cool. So that even if they don't have an opening for you, it can help direct you to other opportunities. So I hope that made sense. Basically, this first way to do it is start Googling research in your area, look for the faculty or different investigators in that area, reach out to them. You can totally reach out. You might not get responses from all, or maybe even not from a lot of them at all, but it only takes like one contact for you to get an opportunity or get plugged into potential opportunities. Another thing is if you need to focus on more local opportunities than just Googling everywhere, you can start talking to local campuses near you, whether it's a community college or a four-year college, and just ask admissions advisors, ideally in the department you're interested in, like, hey, what sort of research things are available? Is there anything I can help with? Especially if you're willing to volunteer, that can go a long way, because you might not be able to get a funded research assistant position, but you can always volunteer, and people are always happy to take good people if they're willing to volunteer. I will say though that if someone is not willing to work hard and do good work, then sometimes it can actually be more of a detriment to bring a volunteer researcher on if they have the potential to actually mess up an experiment or do things wrong to the fact that someone has to redo them. So make sure that you're willing to do a great job, that even if you're volunteering. Okay, so those are two ways. Start Googling, to get plugged into more local things. And then I would say beyond that, beyond those two things, thinking a little bit about what sorts of books that you can read to get familiar with the literature in your research area can be awesome. So not just books actually, but peer-reviewed journal articles, even videos can be helpful if they're really topical. Getting all that down can be great. Even if it doesn't directly lead to an opportunity, you can help get background on that. And that makes me think too that worst case scenario, let's say you can't find anyone to work with, you reach out to 50 people and they all either ghost you or they just don't have an opportunity. You can always do a small project on your own with a few caveats. So one caveat is that the scope of the project has to I think by necessity, it has to be smaller than it would be working with a professional researcher in that field. Sometimes you won't be able to do the kinds of research that you would like to do if you were doing it on your own, in terms of maybe using chemicals. Like, you can't just go get a bunch of this chemical, hydrochloric acid, etc., just in huge quantities to do experiments. You can't do that. You also can't just go out and do research on whales by your own. At least not easily. That sort of thing involves different regulations as well. But there are still things you can do on your own. You can write a literature review on your own. And even if it's not great, having that practice, going through that process, can be super awesome. Again, even if you can't find anyone to work with, doing a literature review on your own is awesome. You can also do some experiments on your own if they're, again, more small in scope. For example, let's say you want to do an experiment on insects like I did. Well, even if you're doing it on your own, there are a lot of states in the United States where you can just collect insects and you don't need a permit, and you can do a small experiment on them. Of course, best practice is to be as humane as possible. But I will say, unlike vertebrates, there aren't a ton of regulations dictating what you can and can't do with insects. So I'm not saying do something really weird or something. I'm just saying, if you do an experiment that is actually valid and doing something interesting, and some of the insects unfortunately pass away unintentionally, it is okay. Like, so that's an example of something that's within the scope of what you can do on your own. And even if it's not high quality research, like it probably won't get published anywhere or anything like that, it's still good practice that you can show someone, hey, I've gone through this process. And if you do that, I super recommend documenting everything. Take really detailed scientific lab notes, or if you're doing a humanities project, document your annotated note-taking process, go through the reflections on how your paper is coming along. A lot of different options. So those are some ideas. Let me know if you have any questions. I answer everything in the comments. Hope this was helpful and interesting. And yeah, thanks for watching.